compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. Because if you're comparing yourself to someone else, I mean, first of all, you don't know very much about the life of the person you're comparing yourself to. You don't know it across all of its dimensions. And second, people are very different, and so comparing yourself to someone else, it's kind of useful, I guess, when you're young, but as you get older and more singular and more particular, it becomes increasingly less useful. Better to compare yourself to a previous version of yourself and work for improvement in that way. When I was 25 or so, I probably weighed about 138 pounds. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day. I drank tremendous amount of alcohol. I was from northern Alberta, this rough little town up in northern Alberta called Fairview, and there were long winters there, and my friends were heavy drinkers, and most of them dropped out of school by the time they were 15 or 16, went off to work on the oil rigs, and it was a rough town, and we drank a lot. And I started when I was 14, and and so I had a lot of bad habits, let's say, and things and I wasn't in great shape physically, and I was also still intellectually obsessed as I am now, and so that would have been in 85. But I decided around then, about 85, 84, something like that, maybe a little earlier, that I was really going to try to get my act together, and so I started doing that. First of all, I quit smoking. Well, that took a long time because I eventually had to quit drinking too in order to quit smoking, and I started working out, started playing sports, which I'd never done. I don't regret that. I had a fine time when I was a kid, but I needed really to get disciplined, and I had to do it because I was working on these hard problems that I've been discussing with all of you, and I've been working on them really, obsessively since I was probably about 18, maybe even earlier than that, and got to the point around 25 when I was in graduate school trying to get my PhD, doing all my research. Like, I published 15 papers by the time I graduated with my PhD, which was by a fairly large measure the most papers that any graduate student at that time had ever published at McGill. I think that's right. It might have been twice as many, or maybe twice as many, maybe even 3 times as many. And at the same time, I wrote Maps of Meaning, which was a terribly difficult thing to do, because I was writing about 3 hours a day doing that, and I couldn't do all that and continue with my misbehavior, what would you say, my massive hedonistic consumption of alcohol and all of that. I just couldn't keep it up and also work seriously on the issues that were at hand. So I had to stop. That's a sacrifice. I had to stop messing about and straighten myself out. bloody thing from it. It's like, wake up, tell the truth, tell the truth. Because you're afraid. You want to get your fear behind you, pushing you. And so what you want to be is more afraid of not pursuing your goals than you are of pursuing them. It's very, very helpful. And lots of times in life, and this is something really worth knowing, and this is one of the advantages to being an autonomous adult, is you don't get to pick the best thing. You get to pick your poison. You have two bad choices, and you get to pick which one you're willing to suffer through. And every choice has a bit of that element in it. And so if you know that, it's really freeing. Because otherwise you torture yourself by thinking, well, maybe there's a good solution to this, compared to the bad solution. It's like, no, sometimes there's just risky solution 1 and risky solution 2. And sometimes both of them are really bad. But you at least get to pick which one you're willing to suffer through. And that actually makes quite a bit of difference, because you're also facing it voluntarily then, instead of it chasing you. And that is an entirely different psychophysiological response. Challenge versus threat, it's not the same, even if the magnitude of the problem is the same. And so putting yourself in a challenging, let's call it mind frame, you can't just do that by magic. putting yourself in a challenging mind frame is much easier on you psychophysiologically because you don't go into the generalized stress response to the same degree. And you're activating your exploratory and seeking systems, which are dopaminergically mediated and that involve positive emotion. So if you can face something voluntarily rather than having it chase you, it's way better for you psychophysiologically. So that's partly why, well, it's worthwhile to go find the dragon in its lair instead of waiting for it to come and eat you. So, and especially when you also add the idea that if you go find the dragon in its lair, you might find it when it's a baby instead of a full-fledged bloody monster that is definitely going to take you down.